You ever been arrested for fishing on your own property? Yeah, I didn't think so. But that's exactly what almost happened to me when the queen of all Karens declared that my peaceful lakeside home was her community amenity. What she didn't know was that the lake she tried to kick me off of, I actually owned it, and a whole lot more. I'm Marcus Thompson, a 45-year-old ex-corporate lawyer who just wanted to fish, relax, and forget about contracts forever. I'd saved for years to buy a quiet cabin by the lake, a place to breathe again. No deadlines, no boardrooms, just sunrise, coffee, and the ripple of water. That Tuesday morning, the world looked perfect. A gold sunrise shimmered over the still water, and I thought finally, peace. Then the dream screeched to a halt, literally. A white BMW fishtailed into my driveway, gravel flying. Out stormed a woman who looked like she practiced yelling into mirrors for sport. Perfect blonde bob, designer outfit, a permanent scowl carved into her face. "Get off our lake!" she shouted before her heels even hit the dock. "This is a private community property!" I blinked, coffee halfway to my lips. "Ma'am, this is my cabin. I own this land. I'm fishing from my dock." Her eyes narrowed like she'd just discovered my existence was a zoning violation. "I'm Victoria Hayes, president of the Homeowners Association. You're trespassing. Cease all lake activity or I'm calling the police." And just like that, she did. She actually dialed 911 for fishing. When the officer arrived, he looked between us, obviously wondering which one of us needed professional help first. I showed my deed and my fishing license. Victoria waved printed HOA violation forms like golden tablets from the sky. The officer finally sighed, told her it was a civil matter, and left. Victoria exploded. "You'll regret this," she hissed before peeling away in that BMW. I thought it was over. But as I walked back inside, I'd find something in an old trunk that would set off the wildest legal twist of my life. What I discovered next would make Victoria wish she'd never touched her phone that day. After the chaos, I needed quiet. I went inside, trying to shake off the absurdity of being reported for existing. That's when I noticed a dusty old chest tucked into my closet, something from the previous owners. Inside were yellowed photos, letters, and one brittle sheet that smelled like history itself, a land deed fragment with my last name, Thompson. The handwriting was hard to read, but one phrase caught my eye. Original property boundaries as established 1847. A lake was drawn in the center. My lake. Before I could process that, Victoria's BMW screeched back into my driveway. She'd returned armed with paperwork. She marched up and started taping cease and desist letters on my door, shouting about $50,000 fines. It felt like living in a Karen versus the Constitution episode of reality TV. Then my neighbor Gary showed up, looking like he'd aged 10 years overnight. "Marcus," he whispered. "Victoria's been telling people she runs this place, claims she owns 200 acres, says she's turning it private." Some buyers believe her. Something clicked in the back of my legal brain. Her arrogance wasn't just ignorance, it was strategy. She was building something, and not just a bad reputation. Calmly, I unfolded the old map again, tracing the edge of the lake. Thompson property, 800 acres. That couldn't be real, could it? That night, as crickets echoed outside, my curiosity hardened into resolve. I'd spent 20 years dismantling corporate fraud. I could handle an HOA tyrant, but truthfully, I had no idea how deep her lies went. Before things spin completely off the rails, a quick thank you. If you've stuck with my story so far, I appreciate you more than you know. Stories like this grow because of you, your comments, your thoughts, your support. If you're enjoying this wild escalation, tap that like button and join the community. Let's see how far this rabbit hole goes together. The next morning, I'd walk into an HOA emergency meeting that would blow every legal fuse I had. 48-hour notice. That's how much time Victoria gave us before her so-called emergency meeting. The printed memo on my door looked official. Seal, signature, everything, but my lawyer instincts were screaming. The language was pure intimidation. Urgent threat to property values, non-compliant residents, mandatory attendance. Fine, I thought. You want to play lawyer? Let's play. The community hall that night looked like a bad high school PowerPoint contest. 8 people showed up, including Victoria. Her presentation title? Unauthorized Lake Activities, Community Threat Assessment. And I kid you not, first slide was a zoomed-in photo of me sipping coffee on my dock. "This man," she declared, dramatically pointing at the screen, "is violating our sacred lake ordinance." I nearly choked laughing, but my amusement died when she called for a vote on banning me from using the lake. 6 hands went up. 8 people decided the fate of 50. It wasn't just ridiculous, it was illegal. Afterward, Gary pulled me aside again. His voice trembled. "Marcus, Victoria offered me $5,000 to testify against you. I swear I didn't want to take it, but my wife's got cancer. We're desperate. That hit me like a gut punch." She was buying loyalty with misery, manipulating good people. That night I didn't sleep. I was half angry, half fascinated. What kind of person built their empire out of forged documents and fear? And why was she so sure she could get away with it? I pulled every HOA statute I could find, cross-checked county laws, and by dawn, I'd confirmed 2 things. Her emergency vote was completely invalid. She was bluffing, big time. But Victoria was about to double down, and I was about to dig up history that would paralyze her entire operation. My next discovery wouldn't just prove she was lying, it would make me question what I actually owned. Feverish curiosity consumed me. I scanned county archives, searching the Thompson name, and there it was, a record from 1847 stating Thompson, landholder, 800 acres. I stared at the number like it was a typo. That amount of land could swallow the lake, the woods, and Victoria's precious neighborhood, but I needed proof. I hired a genealogy and land record specialist named Ms. Avery, an older woman with the kind of excitement historians get when you hand them a potential fortune. Wrapped in dust, while she began her verification process, I turned my attention to Victoria. And what I found next twisted everything. Hidden contracts between her and a development firm. Promises of exclusive lake access. $1 million commissions. Removal of troublesome residents. She wasn't just power-hungry. She was building a fraudulent kingdom. 3 agonizing weeks passed. I kept fishing, pretending life was normal while bulldozers began appearing near the lake. "Community enhancements," Victoria claimed. In reality, she was trying to make her fake authority look real. Then the call came. Ms. Avery's voice trembled through the receiver. "Marcus, the Thompson deed was never properly divided. On paper, you still own the entire original tract." I sat there, silent. 800 acres. The very ground Victoria's house sat on. But before I could even celebrate, trucks were moving earth outside my window. Victoria had started her development. She was building on land she didn't even own, and it was time someone stopped her. While Ms. Avery compiled her report, I documented everything, photographs, dated notices, her fake forms. The deeper I dug, the uglier it got. Victoria had promised developers access she didn't control, stolen deposits, and coerced frightened residents into silence. It was time for a counterstrike. I called a legitimate HOA meeting, real notices, verified time frames. 45 residents showed up, the largest crowd the community had ever seen. The tension buzzed like static as people whispered and side-eyed Victoria, who sat stiff and smiling, pretending not to be sweating through her blazer. I presented the evidence. Illegitimate meetings, bought votes, fraudulent dealings. Then Gary stood up, voice shaking, and confessed publicly what Victoria had offered him. Every bribe, every lie. The room erupted. Months of confusion and fear poured out as people demanded answers. Victoria snapped. "This is a conspiracy. You're all trying to destroy me!" But I wasn't done. Taking a deep breath, I laid down the documentation I'd received earlier that morning from the county clerk, proof that I, Marcus Thompson, held ownership of the entire lake and surrounding land. The gasps were instant. Some gathered closer to see the seal, the dates, the impossible truth. Victoria froze mid-rant, eyes darting like a trapped animal. "That's fake. You can't just own an entire community." "Actually," I said quietly, "I can. And apparently I do." I ended the meeting with one promise. I wouldn't let my neighbors pay for her lies. I'd protect everyone she targeted. But Victoria wasn't finished. When liars lose power, they tend to go nuclear. Victoria's downfall wasn't dramatic at first. It was desperate. Overnight, she began shredding documents, deleting emails, and spinning conspiracy theories online. She told residents I was forging deeds, stealing land, and orchestrating a coup. Then the heavy machinery rolled in again. Maintenance workers hired to reshape the shoreline, destroying evidence of original property lines. That crossed every boundary, literal and legal. I compiled everything and filed reports with the County Fraud Division. Within a week, investigators traced the fake contracts. Her $1 million deal collapsed overnight as the developer realized he'd been conned. When officers finally arrived at her home with a warrant for fraud, theft, and conspiracy, she screamed the exact same words she'd yelled on my dock months earlier. "This is harassment! I built this community." They led her away in handcuffs while half the neighborhood watched in stunned silence. The irony wasn't lost on me. She'd called the cops on me for phishing, and now the cops were taking her for fraud. But even with justice served, I faced the hardest decision of my life. Owning 800 acres meant I held power over everyone, friends, neighbors, even Gary. What should I do with that kind of responsibility? Keep reading. The answer might surprise you more than Victoria's arrest ever did. The media got wind of the story instantly. Man buys cabin, discovers he owns entire county after HOA dispute. Suddenly, I was viral, the HOA Avenger. Reporters camped outside the gate. Strangers asked me legal advice online. I'd wanted peace and ended up in a headline circus. Gary, now my closest ally, sat with me one evening by the lake. "Marcus, you could sell it and walk away a multimillionaire," he said. "Or you could make it public. Donate the land. Protect it forever." That idea terrified me, giving up millions. But also, it felt right. The corporate world had taught me enough about greed. I didn't want to become a mirror image of Victoria with a gentler smile. While I wrestled with the choice, Victoria's trial moved fast. Facing overwhelming evidence, she was convicted and sentenced to 3 years in prison. She'd stolen over $150,000 in residential fees and fake lake rights. Watching her taken away gave me bittersweet closure. Justice wasn't about revenge, it was about restoring balance, so I made my choice. The Thompson family estate would become the Thompson Lake Public Recreation Area. The county accepted immediately. Yeah, I'd traded wealth for peace, but I'd finally earned what I came here for. But 3 years later, something happened that no one, not even me, saw coming. 3 years later, they called me back to that same courthouse, this time for Victoria's parole hearing. I walked in expecting drama. Instead, I saw a completely different woman. No makeup, gray roots, tired eyes. When the board asked if she had anything to say, her voice cracked. I was wrong. I let greed destroy me. I hurt people who trusted me. For a moment, I almost believed her. But I stood to speak for the community anyway. "We've rebuilt after what she did," I told the panel. "But the damage took years to fix. Actions matter." They granted her early release after 2.5 years. When I left the courthouse, the irony hit me again. The woman who once tried to evict me now needed my community's forgiveness to have a home anywhere. The donation I'd made had transformed the lake. Families swimming, kids laughing, locals fishing without fear of fines. It was the paradise I'd dreamed of, and now, finally, belonged to everyone. But redemption takes strange forms, and Victoria's next chapter was one nobody predicted. Time passed, and the community blossomed. Gary became the new HOA president and turned it into a model of transparency. His wife's cancer went into remission, and they built a program to help families facing medical crises. Victoria, meanwhile, was released quietly. She took a job at a retail store and kept her head down. Then something unexpected happened. She began volunteering at the community center, stacking food bank shelves, teaching literacy classes. No fanfare, no speeches. People were wary at first, but over time her actions spoke louder than any apology could. I'd spot her some weekends sitting alone by the lake, my old nemesis, now just a quiet woman feeding ducks. It wasn't friendship or forgiveness, but it was something close to understanding. Meanwhile, the legal precedent from our case changed state laws. My story became a case study in property rights and HOA reform. Gary even started giving talks about transparency prevents tyranny. He always opened with, "It all started with a man who just wanted to fish." Yet even after all those years, one final moment reminded me how far we'd all come. 5 years to the day since that first screaming, "Get off my lake," I stood on my dock watching a family teach their kids how to cast a line. The sun glowed orange across the water, our water now. Every year since the donation, the community holds Thompson Lake Day. It's part festival, part reunion, part reminder of what we overcame. Seeing the joy on people's faces is the richest feeling I'll ever know. I glanced across the lake and saw Victoria sitting on her usual bench, quietly watching the sunset. She caught my eye and gave a small, almost shy wave. I nodded back. A silent truce between two people, forever tied by one unbelievable story. When kids ask me how it all happened, I tell them the truth. It started with a cup of coffee, a fishing rod, and a woman who dialed 911 because she couldn't stand being wrong. The lesson? Sometimes the loudest voices have the weakest claims. Sometimes the fight you never asked for shows you exactly who you are. And sometimes the greatest power isn't what you own, but what you choose to give away. So I fish, I breathe. And every morning, I thank that crazy twist of fate that turned a confrontation into a legacy. If this story reminded you that standing your ground and choosing kindness can change everything, drop your thoughts below and share it with someone who needs a reminder that karma can have a wicked sense of humor. Thanks for being part of this story. Until next time, stay calm, stay kind, and always read the fine print.